All right, so we're going to start at the ingredient table station. At the ingredient table, it did have a scenario that said everyone has measured all of their ingredients. Did they leave the ingredient table okay? If no, list the 2 ways the students didn't leave the ingredient table correctly. The 2 things we were looking for at this station were that, first of all, they made quite a big mess when they were measuring. When you measure, it's really important to try to measure over the container so that any excess that you measure off falls back into the container versus all over the ingredient counter. Another thing that we see a lot is we see equipment left up at the ingredient counter. This stuff needs to, if they brought it up, it's got to go back on your tray and go back to your kitchen. Otherwise, what happens is your next group comes in after you and then they're missing equipment. So just make sure if you bring it up, you bring it back. In kitchen 1, we had another scenario. It was our clean dishes scenario. It says this student is washing dishes and putting them away in the cupboard. Were the dishes ready to be put away? If no, what should they have done first? And there was actually a couple things going on here. First of all, we had a dirty measuring cup, and this is actually a measuring cup that I've saved that I did find my first year of teaching in the cupboard, and it's super, super dirty. This is how somebody put it away into the cupboard. We got to make sure that everything gets fully washed, dried, and put away. And that was kind of what was happening over in the other cupboard too. We had a cup in it that still had some sort of liquid, and we also had a wet plate. Both of those things would need to be, this looks like it was washed, but somebody didn't dry it. So make sure we're washing, drying, and putting everything away in the correct place. The other thing in station number 1 was that we had a spilled ingredient. Spills happen. I spill at home. It happens when you're cooking. If things spill, don't panic. Grab a bowl or grab the garbage or the broom and just wipe it into a bowl or wipe it into the garbage. That way the spill gets cleaned up and it's not going to cause any more problems. If something spills on the floor, you also need to alert people in your kitchen, hey, I spilled some water, hey, I spilled some oil, so that somebody doesn't come by and trip. In station number 2, we had another scenario. It said this, it's a cutting scenario. This student is getting ready to measure 2 tablespoons of butter or margarine. Are they using the correct equipment to cut this ingredient? If no, list what they should be using. And if we looked at it, there was a knife, which is good. They were cutting the butter. But what was wrong is that they were missing a cutting board. It's super important that we cut things on cutting boards. That will help us not only protect our cupboards, but it will help it be a good place, good sturdy place for us to cut on. The other thing that was happening in this kitchen was that a student put plastic and metal into the microwave. We do not put plastic in the microwave. Number 1, most of it will begin to melt. This happened a couple years ago in class. Some students were melting butter and the butter melted right through when it heated up. The students ended up spending most of the hour cleaning up their microwave rather than cooking. The other reason that we do not use plastic at school is because when plastic is heated, it actually can release different things into your foods that they say can cause cancer. So plastic never goes in the microwave, it's always glass. The other thing is metal. Metal doesn't go in the microwave because number 1, it can start a fire and it can also short out your microwave. So never microwave metal or plastic. It should always be glass. If you're ever unsure, feel free to ask me. In kitchen number 3, we had a wash tub with one of our big chef's knives in it. Whenever we have these knives, we need to make sure that we're being very cautious with them because they are extremely sharp. One thing that's scary is if you're cutting with it and you're finished and you just throw it back into the wash tub and then all of a sudden the dishwasher comes along and reaches in and doesn't realize it's in there. That's when we can potentially see cuts from the big knives. So my recommendation with the big knives is as soon as you're done cutting with it, it should go right next to the sink. That way when the dishwasher is ready for it, they can wash it and be responsible for it. Another thing is to simply ask your dishwasher, hey, I'm done with the knife, can you wash this next? One thing with the chef's knives and the big knives that we use in class, they all need to be washed, dried, and returned to the ingredient table by the end of class because I do have to count them and make sure that I get all of them back for the day. The other thing that was happening in kitchen 3 was that we had drawers open. We also had some cupboards open. Whenever we have open drawers, we want to make sure that we open them, Get out what we need and then close them. Same thing with your cupboard doors. Get out what you need and shut them. I've watched way too many students hit their heads on open cupboard doors and on open drawers, and it does not feel good. In kitchen 4, we had another scenario. It was our oven scenario. It says this student is getting ready to take this baking dish out of the oven. It is hot. Are they using the correct equipment to get the baking dish out of the oven? If no, list what they should be using. And if you looked in the oven, they had a pan with some of our dishcloths on it. These are not going to protect your hands from a hot oven and a hot pan. These are to wash dishes. What we want to make sure that we're using is our oven mitts. Our oven mitts are going to be worn kind of like gloves, and they are going to protect not only your hands, but also up your arm, so that when you do reach in, your arms are protected so that you can take it out and either set it onto the stove, or if you have your pot holders ready, you can also set it onto your pot holders until you're ready to serve your dish. The other thing that was happening in station number 4 was that we had forks on the floor. If anything falls on the floor, you need to pick it up and give it to your dishwasher. One thing I hear a lot from students is I hear, 5-second rule, we can still use it. These floors get super, super dirty at school, and they're not a floor that you want to eat off of. So make sure that you're giving those to your dishwasher. Let's head to station 5. Station 5 was the electric hand mixer scenario. It says this student is getting ready to plug in the electric hand mixer. Is it ready to be plugged in? If no, what should they do first? This is an extremely tricky one. You really kind of had to look at it and think about it. This mixer is in the on position. That is what is wrong with it. If I plug this in right now, the beaters would immediately start turning, and if my fingers were in the way or another student was in the way or their hair was in the way and I'm not paying attention, somebody could really get hurt with this. So whenever we use an electric hand mixer, we want to start with it in the off position, and really any electronics in general in the kitchen should always be off. Plug them in, and now I am in control of the speed on the hand mixer, and I can choose to bump it up as I'm ready and as I'm mixing my food item. The other one in kitchen 5 was that there was a pan handle over the edge of the stove. This is unsafe because if somebody comes walking along, or if you're busy in your kitchen and somebody backs into it, your whole pan can go onto the floor. This happened to me a couple years ago where they were boiling water for fried rice and somebody bumped it and the whole pan of water went on the floor. Luckily, everybody was standing back far enough that nobody got burned, but it's really, really scary, plus it makes a really big mess. When we have pan handles, we want to make sure they are either to the back of the oven or to the side. They should be over the cooking surface so that people can walk by here without hitting it. Station number 6 had another scenario. This was our washing dishes scenario. It says the dishwasher is getting ready to wash the dishes in the wash tub. Do they have everything in their wash tub to correctly wash these dishes? If no, what are they missing? And this was another kind of tricky one because they have their wash tub, they have equipment in here, they have a brush to wash things. What they are missing is soap. When we use our soap in class, one thing I like to do is kind of the 3-second rule. So I turn it over and I count to 3. 1, 2, 3. And however much soap I get into my wash tub is how much soap you should be able to wash pretty much all of your dishes, if not your kind of first wave of dishes. So soap is definitely what was missing from this wash tub setup. The other item in this kitchen was that if you looked at this, it was kind of hard because the pan handle was correctly in the right position, but what was wrong is that they had a metal spoon in a metal pan. When we cook with things that are metal, metal is going to heat up when it's in something that's hot, so we shouldn't use full metal spoons to stir anything on the stove. What we would want to use instead is either our wooden spoons or spoons that have plastic handles or rubber scrapers or whatever it is, but it should have either wood or plastic, and that will keep it safe so that it doesn't heat up and cause you to burn your hand. Our last station is station 7. We had our last scenario here. It was our cleanup scenario. It says it's the end of class and this kitchen is getting ready to be checked by Mrs. Stoll. Is the kitchen ready to be checked to leave? If no, what still needs to be cleaned up? As we look in this kitchen, we had garbage. I see this a lot. We got to make sure that garbage gets thrown away into the waste baskets. They also left rags. Unfortunately, at school, we can't leave dirty rags. We got to put these into the dirty dish or the dirty basket of clothes. And then we need to set up 2 clean rags for the next group that's coming in. Over on the stove is probably the scariest thing I see as a teacher cooking with students is flammable items on or near the stove. Things like oven mitts, hot pads, recipes should not be on anywhere on the cooking surface. Even if these are cold burners, it still is unsafe. We want to make sure that they are a distance away from the cooking surface so that if a burner somehow magically turns on, or if it's still hot, or if it's on, it's not going to start a fire. And those are all 7 of our safety stations.